So today's video is going to be another one of my revampings where I'm going to be taking one of my old video ideas and kind of redoing it with TG just to give it kind of like a fresh coat of paint because like some of my opinions have evolved and like the general quality of the video will just be better. We're actually going to be doing the first What If versus Battle hybrid video I ever did, which was putting the Hokage and Minato's situation against Obito and the Ninetales. So just in general, just to kind of like break down the video, this is just kind of like a reminder that Minato's situation is actually insane, even for like most of these Hokage, it's going to be very difficult. So for example, right, he had to go save Kushina, and then he had to beat Obito fast enough that he could get back to the village and stop the Ninetales from destroying it with a tailed beast bomb. We'll just say like there's very little margin of error because that's two of the win conditions. So the first being just get Obito out of the village, whatever it takes. The other is don't let the Ninetales destroy the village, which they're going to have to do probably very fast. And then also they're going to have to seal the Ninetales. Now in this situation, they don't necessarily have to seal it into Naruto, because Minato is in a special situation where he knew about the Child of Prophecy, and at the end of his life, he kind of had like a revelation that he needed to seal the Ninetales into Naruto. This is different. This is all going to be out of character, so like none of the other Hokage are going to know about this. But they do have other options to like seal or restrain the Ninetales. So for example, Kushina offered to take the Ninetales down with her. And then you also have like, for example, Hiruzen can use the Reaper Death Seal to possibly seal like the entire Ninetales or something. So they have options here. It's just kind of a matter of if they're going to be able to pull this off. Just in general, the hypothetical for this is going to start when Obito takes Kushina. So they're going to have to start and save Kushina first, since that's going to be pretty critical to save the Ninetales probably. And then also, everyone's going to be out of character here, so we can just have like a consistent like fight. So like there's not going to be anything going on with like Kakashi realizing who like the masked man is Obito or anything else. Like there's nothing emotional going on here. The first person I want to do is Warwick Kakashi, and this is specifically like the Warwick Kakashi that's more towards the end, where he has like full mastery of like Kamui and like can go in and out of the Kamui dimension. He can probably save Kushina with Kamui, like because when the Ninetales is ripped out of Kushina, Obito decides to just use the Ninetales to try to step on Kushina, and Minato saves her by teleporting away. In this situation, Kakashi can Kamui her, and then like let's say he can either hold her there or he can Kamui her back and give her to Naruto or whatever he wants to do. In general, there's two ways that this fight can go, which depends on if Kakashi retreats or not. So in the original situation, Minato decided to retreat, and then we see as a direct reaction, Obito's like, okay, I guess I'll just go attack the village now. Now, in this situation, if Minato had stayed, more than likely Obito's going to use the Ninetales to fight. But as we know, Minato retreated. In this situation, Kakashi has the opportunity to just Kamui himself out of there, and then bring Kushina to Naruto. And that would bring us to a more regular timeline. Or Kakashi can stay there, keep Kushina in the Kamui dimension, and try to fight the both of them away from the village. So I'll first go ahead and focus on the situation where he retreats first. So if Kakashi decides to retreat, then Obito goes to the village. Kakashi's not going to make it back to the village without Obito trying to, like, let's say, 1v1 him. Because as Minato went back to the village, Obito instantly tried to separate Minato away from the village. So in this kind of 1v1 scenario where the Ninetales is off in the distance and Kakashi's not fighting him, I don't really feel like Kakashi has a very good chance here, even if he has like the advantage of having Kamui. When it comes to Warwick Kakashi, like I don't want to go too much into like his scaling. TG will go more into that. But even if we want to highball him and put him like, let's say he's about base Minato level in general, just like general stats, even base Minato didn't really beat Obito. Minato had to resort to using Flying Raijin level 2 to beat Obito, right? And there were several times where Minato had to save himself by teleporting, because Obito was like wrapping him up with chains and stuff and like just tricking him with Kamui. And we also know that Obito can resist Kamui. Like Kakashi tried to Kamui Obito at the end of the Kage Summit, and Obito resisted it. We also had some moments in the Warwick where like Kakashi tried to Kamui the Geto statue and Obito was able just to repel it. So just using that on Obito is not going to work here. And just in general, like Kakashi doesn't really have like the tool set to take down Kamui by himself. Like when he was fighting in the Warwick, he was having to rely on like using Naruto's like Rasengans and Shadow Clones to beat Obito's Kamui. So in this situation, just like kind of coalescing all the ideas I have here, Kakashi doesn't really have a win condition here, but it's very easy for him to escape the Kamui dimension as he can just Kamui himself. We've seen him do that like several times. The problem is that that's going to be using a lot of chakra, so it's not going to be very efficient for him. And then on the other side of things, when it comes to the Nine Tails, this is all going to be taking too long, and then the Nine Tails is just going to destroy the village. Because even for Minato, who defeated Obito like within a few interactions, he barely made it back in time to teleport the Nine Tails away from just blowing up the village with a tailed beast bomb. So just in general, even though like if we highball Kakashi, he just doesn't have like the tool set to beat Kamui, and then also like even if he could somehow get Obito away from the village, he's not going to stop the Nine Tails in time. So, in my opinion, I think that he pretty safely fails all win conditions. But TG has some other things to say.
Yeah, they'll scoff at me, bro. Nah, self-conscious. No. So this does kind of depend on where you place War Kakashi. I definitely agree with the outcome. I just think there is a bit of a range with War Kakashi. He does have some impressive feats, especially like where he scales to Minato. Even when he like performs on par with Minato in the work, that Minato for a while does have the Nine Tails chakra and whatnot, so you could even make the argument in some sense as an Edo Tensei he might be stronger. On top of this, right, he is able to damage Rinnegan Obito more than anybody had in the series and whatnot, just by punching him, which is really it's honestly kind of dumb. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, but he can like take Rasengans to his back and whatnot. But regardless of all of this, it's just a matter of like his toolkit and his speed not being so much more above. Because again, if you go off like the relativity to Minato, right, the way Obito fights and the fact that like Akashi's not gonna have those ways to like teleport around the battlefield and whatnot. Like if he gets caught, in the same sense that Minato was, like, and he's not gonna be able to teleport out. Even if he goes to the Kamui dimension and teleports himself out, his stamina is gonna take a hit, and that's just more time for the Nine Tails to rampage and whatnot. So it's not like just him being a superior fighter really grants him the absolute W here, because he is going to be running a gauntlet of sorts, and he does have a lot to deal with in this situation. So even though there is wiggle room for Kakashi's strength at this point, it still doesn't mean he'd be able to win in those same circumstances. So yeah, I agree. I don't think he clears either. So next up, we have Tsunade, who is more than likely definitely not going to retreat. If we're looking at her character and whatnot, she's not that type of person. Even when Pain's like leaving the village, she like chases after him and whatnot. So she's not even that type of individual. But she essentially has no chance here. On top of like Obito himself being way too much for her. If you want to get a gauge for this, his speed's more comparable to Minato's, who's like more of a rival to the Raikage, who's just blatantly faster than Tsunade at her peak in the war. So she would never be able to tag him any capacity. In all likelihood, she would just get caught by his chains and sent to the Kamui dimension, which is what the chains were for. So I think she gets this interaction ends very quickly. She is the absolute wrong type of fighter to fight Obito. And even more than that, like she doesn't really have anything for the Nine Tails. Katsuyu, even with her acid, isn't going to be able to damage the Nine Tails or is really going to be able to subdue him in any capacity. Maybe you argue like Gamma Bunta because he sat on the Nine Tails, but even then the Nine Tails like was charging a Bijou Bomb while Gamma Bunta was on him. So no, Tsunade doesn't really have too much here. So yeah, she either gets slaughtered by Obito or by some miracle she does like survive not losing in like the first like few moments of the fight. The Nine Tails is going to be too much for her too. So yeah, this is pretty clear. She doesn't really make it past any round.
And then next we have Donzo, which is kind of like an interesting new addition to like this type of video. I'll just go ahead and kind of say, like, I don't think that Donzo, like both of us don't think Donzo has a very good chance of clearing any win conditions here, but he has a lot of interesting things going on. There's a lot of gray area with Donzo that a lot of people don't really talk about. So for starters, when it comes to just, like, let's say Donzo versus Obito, Izanagi is pretty useful here. Even though, like, that's a winning exchange for Obito, like, Donzo can still, if he gets Kamui, he can just Izanagi out, and then he starts to understand Kamui better, and it's going to be harder to Kamui him over and over again. So Donzo's not going to be the type of fighter here that's just going to instantly lose, at least if he's 1v1ing Obito. The problem is that, you know, if he comes and he tries to, like, save Kushina, he doesn't really have a very good way to, like, escape. So, like, for example, like, Kakashi can Kamui out, Minato can teleport out. Danzo doesn't really have that choice, and I don't think Obito's just gonna let him like run free. He's gonna try and beat Danzo in this situation if when he has it. In terms of fighting the Ninetales, like let's be honest here, Danzo doesn't really have a chance unless he uses Koto Matsukami, possibly. Because there's a very interesting little moment when Danzo's fighting Sasuke where when Obito's kind of explaining like Danzo's power in Izanagi, he says that Danzo is trying to control the Ninetales by combining Hashirama and the Uchiha's power, which is a very interesting and like pretty specific thing to say. So it's kind of like it kind of makes me wonder like is and this also goes into like Danzo's Koto Matsukami, which we don't know that much about, is like how strong is Danzo's Koto Matsukami? Because we know, like, for example, the Koto Matsukami that Itachi used overrode Itachi's Mangekyo Sharingan, and it was it was intended to override Sasuke's Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. So it kind of begs the question, right? Is that can Danzo's Koto Matsukami override Obito's Genjutsu on the Ninetales? And it's just like we were kind of talking about it, trying to like reason through it, and we feel like there's not much information kind of supporting either outcome if it works or not. And then there's also the problem is that like if Danzo uses Koto Matsukami, which is like a one-time use for a fight, then it's possible that Obito just recasts like a Genjutsu on the Ninetales. Possibly. And like even if Koto Matsukami works in this situation, which is a very big if, I don't really think that Danzo can beat Obito in that 1v1. Even if he uses 10 Izanagis, he's eventually gonna lose. And then after that, Obito can just take control of the Ninetales again. So there's a lot of interesting things going on here. Overall, Danzo's just not quite doesn't quite have what it takes to beat Obito, even though he might be able to control the Ninetales.
Yeah, no, you summed it up perfectly. Very solid explanation. And just like even like by the nature of Danzo's arsenal, when he's fighting Sasuke, Obito's like internally monologuing and just completely pinpointing everything about Danzo. So it's just it really isn't that much of a chance. And even with like Danzo potentially having Koto Matsukami, Obito's just chilling. He's not even fearful of it. So it kind of gives this idea like, is the Koto Matsukami a variant that Itachi implanted in Naruto different than the version that Danzo had? Maybe there's a potency difference. I haven't heard anybody talk about that. So there's a possibility there. But yeah, it just even though like there's a little wiggle room for it, we will admit it is a little like vague to talk about. But realistically, like Danzo doesn't have too much at this point. Just for via Obito, especially if like you look at the fact that he wouldn't really lead with Koto Matsukami. So I think yeah, you pretty much summed it up.
Just saying, like Danzo, we think he fails all three win conditions with a very small chance of like stopping the Ninetales. But as for everyone else, no one has cleared any win conditions. Which brings us to Hiruzen, specifically old Hiruzen, since we don't really know much about Prime Hiruzen. Now, for old Hiruzen, there's also like he's going to be having the help of younger Hiruzen, but we won't. Timelines don't really matter here. In this situation, like perhaps he can save Kushina. Even if he does, he's not in a very good situation here because he doesn't have the opportunity to retreat. So he's going to be having to fight both Obito and the Ninetales at the same time. Hiruzen is not really built or like cut for this either. Like kind of like how Tsunade is not really cut out for this. So in terms of using his only choice chance is using Reaper Death Seal. But that's not something like you can just use like willy-nilly. So like when Hiruzen used it on Orochimaru, he had to like disarm Orochimaru and grab him in order to like start the jutsu. And then same with like Minato using Reaper Death Seal on Ninetales. Like Kushina had to restrain the Ninetales for that to happen. So he can't just do that out of the blue. So, and he doesn't really have any way to restrain either of these fighters either. He hasn't really showed anything indicating that he can just like beat the Ninetales. So in the anime, he does repel the Ninetales out of the village. Like he stretches the monkey stick like a mile long, which is kind of like comically funny. But and just, I don't know what to say about that. But in terms of like we're going off the manga. In the manga, we don't see how the Ninetales pushed out of the village. We just see there's like a coalition between Hiruzen and other shinobi just push the Ninetales out of the village. And we kind of saw younger Hiruzen 1v1 the Ninetales. And in the end, Hiruzen fell to his knees and Kurama was firing up a tail beast bomb and Hiruzen had no response until Minato got there. So there's no way Hiruzen's beating the Ninetales here. And then you just add on Obito, where Hiruzen doesn't have anything specific in his arsenal that can deal with Kamui, except maybe Shadow Clones. But really, all in all, like he also isn't going to clear any wing additions here.
Next up, we have Tobirama. Now, Tobirama is interesting in the fact that he's somewhat similar to Minato, obviously with the teleportation. The difference with Tobirama and Minato, just to preface this, is that Tobirama can mark his kunai, but he does not have like stationary marked kunai on him, or it's never like shown that he just carries them. We just know like the mark on his kunai is like out of place and he can manually mark them. And the reason this matters, right, is because if he's fighting Obito, first and foremost, he can retreat, right? But he's not going to be able to just be flying over like around the place in the same sense that Minato was against Obito. He's not going to have those same capabilities. Even if he does, he's not going to have like a whole ton of kunai. Like Minato in character will throw a bunch of kunai around or just have an unlimited amount. Soberama has none of this, right? So he's going to be having a very difficult time against Obito. And even the rest of his arsenal doesn't really matter too much since there's no real like obscene like speed that his techniques have or anything like any hacks that are really going to be able to take down Obito. So realistically, he can go retreat away. The problem is though, is that on top of like not being as developed with Minato with the Flying Rajin, for example, not having access to Flying Rajin level 2, maybe you could argue he throws a kunai, kind of does what he does against Madara. It's unlikely, but even if he retreats for whatever reason, Tobirama doesn't really have what it takes to like really take on the Nine Tails in any capacity. Like the water style is not going to do it. His water style was never shown to be that potent. Maybe paper bombs, but like they're never shown to be like potent enough unless you maybe count like Hashirama's Deity Gate to like to pierce the Nine Tails hide. So Tobirama really shouldn't be able to take down the Nine Tails either. So on top of like struggling with Obito, we could see Tobirama retreating in the same sense Minato did. But against the Nine Tails and Obito, he doesn't really have anything, or for them like realistically individually.
And then next we have Naruto, and so we didn't want to do like Hokage Naruto because that just wouldn't be fair. So we're doing what we felt like was the most fair, and that's KCM2 Naruto, and that's specifically the Naruto that is at full allies with Kurama, can use the Kurama avatar, but he doesn't have access to like Sage mode in that mode yet. In terms of what's going on here, he's probably just going to be playing fast enough to save Kushina in the initial situation, and then after that, I could see definitely Naruto wanting just to fight there, and so that creates like a weird situation where we have like the full Nine Tails facing Naruto and half of his own Nine Tails. For this, we already saw that base Naruto, like at the beginning of the war on Turtle Island, basically beat half the Nine Tails, the half of the Nine Tails inside of him with a little bit of help of Kushina and B. Like Kushina held down the Nine Tails for like a second for him, for example. But in general, the result of that fight was Naruto throwing a Rasen Shuriken at the Nine Tails, and the Nine Tails was pretty down bad after that. We saw that all Naruto did was steal a chakra after that, but if this was like a real fight, it would be very close in the end. So this is Naruto, like probably like almost over 100 chapters later, who's stronger, and he also has his own half of the Nine Tails. So those halves of the Nine Tails, this is getting really complicated. Those halves of the Nine Tails cancel out. And then we have base Naruto. Base Naruto versus the other half of the Nine Tails that Obito has control of is like, kind of like an even match, more or less. And generally, I felt like I wouldn't even say even matchup at this point. I would say that by that point in the war arc, like base Naruto has probably surpassed half of the Nine Tails. So in this situation, I don't think Obito is really doing anything if Naruto's in his Kurama Avatar state, because if he just like tries to grab like the entire Kurama Avatar and tries to Kamui him, then I think that the Nine Tails can just break out of his grasp or just like step on Obito and force him to go intangible. So this kind of turns into more of like a half of the Nine Tails of Naruto versus the full Nine Tails, and I support more of the half of the Nine Tails of Naruto because Naruto has things like giant Rasengans. He can also use his own tailed Beast Bomb. Maybe he even uses Rasen Shuriken at this point. So in general, I think that Naruto probably beats the Nine Tails into submission here, or at least like defeats them for the time being, and then he has to fight Obito, which he would have to do in not in the Kurama Avatar. And from there, we kind of saw like a bit of this fight in a way in the war arc, because we saw that he was fighting Rinnegan Obito with the help of like Kakashi, Guy, and B. And in that fight, there were plenty of situations where Naruto was mostly like fighting on his own and just holding his own for the most part. I think that Obito generally had like an edge on him, and there were times where like he had to be saved or helped. But in general, I feel like Rinnegan Obito only has like a decent edge on this Naruto. So if we rewind all the way back to Teen Obito with just one Sharingan, no Rinnegan, he's much younger. I feel like it would make sense that Naruto would probably have the edge in this situation. And just in general, I don't think that Naruto is necessarily going to beat Obito because he doesn't really have a good way to counter Kamui, but he's going to be able to, for example, use his chakra arms to save himself if Obito tries to start comboing him, and things like that. He's just generally like I said earlier, we saw him fight Rinnegan Obito, and he did well for the most part. So in this situation, he should be fine. Is there anything you want to add to this TG specifically to like the Nine Tails versus Nine Tails fight?
No, no. Honestly, like Naruto should pretty much just obliterate the Nine Tails. I mean, he does seem to surpass it. Even with like just via his control over the half of the Nine Tails and how much stronger that makes him. There would really be like no way. There would really be no reason to suggest like this Nine Tails, whose only like real way of fighting is just tail beast bombs. And if you really want to get into it, right? If you really want to be like weird, you could say like the Nine Tails would give Naruto comms on how to beat the Nine Tails. Like inside of him, he would just give him communications on that. So no, realistically, he's gonna be able to focus the chakra a lot better. And he does have a couple diverse ways of fighting. Even the Rasen Shuriken in the fight in Naruto's head, maybe you take that fight one way or another, was able to like physically, I don't want to say damage, but affect the Nine Tails. So Naruto does kind of like grow more relative to the Nine Tails, which is the point of the series. He has to take his power, obviously. But yeah, I think you summed it up pretty well. There's no reason to suggest like that full Nine Tails would be stronger. Last up, we have Hashirama Wood Daddy Senju. Quite honestly, as you might imagine, this is kind of a stomp in Hashirama's favor. Now, I'll preface this with, yes, Obito can like technically defeat Hashirama if he like grabs him and BFRs him, but Hashirama's stats should just be so much higher at this point that the minute Obito tries to materialize, like Hashirama would still just move and backhand him. In the same sense, right? I'll make a bit of a comparison, right? Madara, when he has like an Edo Rinnegan, is like implied to be a rival to Rinnegan Obito. He gets his body with no eyes, and he's like stronger. He's back to his old strength and whatnot. So Hashirama kind of scales to that. And Hashirama also has to kind of like tangle with Madara, right? And Madara is able instantly to identify like shinobi strategies and even the inner workings of Obito's Kamui, right? And Hashirama was able to fight him for 3 days straight. So Hashirama has to stalemate with somebody who can like constantly evaluate jutsu and identify how they work on the spot. So Hashirama's intelligence is actually kind of insane in that regard if you think about it. But realistically, yeah, nothing. Pretty like he's gonna be too fast for Obito. Obito won't be able to grab him. Yes, I'll concede if he does. That's the end of the fight. The Nine Tails is absolutely nothing to Hashirama at this point. Hashirama's wooden golem or the wood human technique is stated to be a rival to the full Nine Tails. And that's with Madara controlling it. So this Nine Tails like would just be the same thing. He would get smacked around. Worst come to worst, he gets Shinsu Senju, but he can suppress and separate the Nine Tails from Obito. Just like Minato did, although I'll be less permanent. And it just kind of comes down to like how you perceive him deducing Obito's abilities, which his intelligence should scale to that of Madara, so he should be able to deduce it just as quickly as well.
Yeah, and I guess just kind of like sum up this video to talk about all the outcomes. Like we feel like Wara, Kakashi, Tsunade, and Hiruzen basically have almost no chance of clearing any of the wing conditions. We feel like Danzo has like a very small chance of beating the Nine Tails. There's just like so much gray area with him that we don't really know what to make of it, but we lean towards him also not clearing any wing conditions. We also feel like Tobirama generally holds himself up better than all those other people, but he also doesn't end up clearing any of the wing conditions. And then we feel like KCM2 Naruto can probably, with very good chance of clearing all win conditions, and then he can just use like Kushina or Hiruzen to seal the Nine Tails. And then, of course, as we just said, Hashirama can do this very easily as well. And then he can just use someone else to seal the Nine Tails.
I mean, it's just kind of like, I'm going to be honest, right? Like, it does kind of put into perspective, like how strong you kind of have to be to fulfill the requirements here. And like how impressive it was that Minato did. Like the two guys who cleared can make clones like extremely, like can make like 10 plus clones extremely relative to themselves, or like the wood clone. Like so it's like you have to be at a certain level. So Minato doing this is just it's just really impressive. So it kind of goes to show. Yeah.
Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos in the future. Comment something if you have something to say,
And thank y'all for watching. I guess I'll see y'all next time.